Hey guys, Ben here from Wrestling Life, and today allow me to jump back in my time machine all the way 28 years ago to September 20th, 1997, WWF One Night Only. The first ever World Wrestling Federation UK only pay-per-view broadcast on the then brand new Sky box office. This was really uncharted territory for us UK fans because for all these years we had gotten used to pay-per-views being part of the Sky Sports subscription. This was the first time that, unlike our friends across the pond, we'd ever actually had to pay out specifically to watch a show. And that was only really made possible because of one man, the first ever Wrestling Life Hall of Fame inductee, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith. Much like with SummerSlam 1992 5 years earlier, One Night Only was built all around the homecoming of the British Bulldog, defending his European Championship against the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels. I've still got my programme from this event. There we are. It's such a cool and distinctive programme. And just casting my mind back to that night. So I was 13 years old, and quite wonderfully, this was my first and only WWF television appearance. The eagle-eyed amongst you, if you want to go back to One Night Only, and I think it's between after Hunterhurst Helmsley and Dude Loves match, there is some vox pops being recorded with people around the audience. And if you look closely a couple of times, there's a little guy just above the microphone, long curtains, Bret Hart sunglasses on his head, looking pretty lost around the screen. And that's yours truly, before the beard and the hair loss. I was a very little boy, a huge Bret Hart fan. I'd been to my first show at November 1996, a really, really disappointing house show at Birmingham NEC. But 12 months later almost, One Night Only couldn't have been more of a different experience. Had such a huge feel to it. A sellout at the NEC, 11,000 fans packed in for this huge show, and I just remember it so vividly that night being there. I remember the atmosphere going in. I remember the excitement. It had all the bells and whistles. It looked incredible. These beautiful Union Jack WWF logos everywhere. It had such a distinctive look and feel. A look and feel which has since been immortalised in WWE video games. It really was a very, very distinct one-off show. And I remember being a little boy and being stunned. Vince McMahon comes down to ringside, Jim Ross, Jerry Lawler, the A game was there. This was a top tier WWF show. The show kicked off with Hunterhurst Helmsley going one-on-one with Dude Love. And just think about that for a second. Two future WWE Hall of Famers with, I think, 18 World Championships between them, kicking off a show. And this was a month removed from their SummerSlam 1997 fantastic cage match that they had. And this is we see Hunterhurst Helmsley get the win here. Hunterhurst Helmsley accompanied by Chyna. I remember being a young boy and Chyna come to ringside. I've got a great photo of her staring a hole through me that I took on my little camera. She was such an intimidating presence. And this match, obviously, we're on the upward trajectory for the future Triple H. Gets the win over Dude Love. I loved the Dude Love character. This was obviously the summer of love for Mick Foley. And a really solid opener for those two. But just incredible to think that was the first match we got for this show. Less exciting was Tiger Ali Singh getting a win over Leaf Al Snow Cassidy. Tiger Ali Singh at this point was still full of potential, at least in the WWF's eyes. He'd won the Kuwaiti Cup tournament. They really were focusing on his push, but it just wasn't there. The charisma wasn't there. He wasn't going to be the big star that I think they had in mind. And this was one of the last times we really saw him on a pay-per-view. There was a tag match. This was for Tag Team Championship. So the champions, the Headbangers, Mosh and Thrasher, defeating Los Boricuas, Miguel Perez and Savio Vega. I often forget that the Headbangers ever held the Tag Team Championships, to be honest. Pretty crazy. And this was, of course, in the time when it was all about the factions. So Los Boricuas, DOA, Nation of Domination, the Truth Commission, prime time for factions in the WWF. After that, we had a singles match between the Patriot and Flash Funk. The Patriot had just come off his feud with Bret Hitman Hart. He'd just been contending for the World Championship less than 2 weeks earlier at Ground Zero. So, to see the Patriot was actually a really big deal at that time. Del Wilkes never really, managed to do much with the WWF after this time, but at this period of time, he was very much positioned as top talent. Flush Funk, obviously Too Cold Scorpio, never really connected with the WWF fan base to a major degree. So this, very much this was got your vibes of a house show match, but you can already see kind of the layer in here in terms of the kind of talent that are involved in the show, and that becomes really, really clear when we get our next match, which is the Legion of Doom going head to head with the Godwins. Now I've had Mark Canterbury, Henry Godwin on the show talking to me about the career-ending neck injury that he had at the hands of a botched doomsday device, and how that ended up being the beginning of the end of his wrestling life. This is very much in the midst of that feud before that happens, and I just remember, as someone who missed out on SummerSlam 1992 live, seeing the Legion of Doom was just incredible. Like, even though this wasn't the same LOD that I grew up on as a young boy, to see them live, they just had such an incredible presence, and I absolutely loved this match. It's a match I've gone back and watched countless times since, just for pure nostalgia. And I loved the Godwins during this era too. But what makes the WWF One Night Only truly special, and why I wanted to record a video in it, was the last 3 matches. So I've talked through so far about, the undercard, but the last 3 matches was really all about the Hart Foundation. And it was also really the beginning, in my mind, of when the Attitude Era properly kicked into gear. There's a match between Vader and Owen Hart, and it's just absolutely stunning. If you can find it, go out of your way to watch it. It's just, Owen Hart is obviously the heel in theory. He's just had his rival. He's in the midst of his rivalry with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Everything's gone down at SummerSlam 1997, but the crowd was so behind him, and this was such a fantastic David versus Goliath encounter, which just showed you how amazing Owen was, and that crowd reaction and the fan support that was for him. I adore this match. It's genuinely one of my favourite Owen Hart matches. Vader gets a win, which is surprising by this point in 1997, because Leon White really wasn't on an upward trajectory with WWF anymore. But I love this match. It's an absolute classic. Talking about classics though, the WWF Championship match between Bret Hitman Hart and The Undertaker is out of this world. I know Bret has talked about how it was one of his favourite matches. It features on the Best There Is, the Best Was, and the Best There Ever Will Be DVD set. It's a match which I think is overlooked because of the show it was on, the fact that this wasn't aired live at the time to a domestic audience. But it's superb. It blows their SummerSlam 1997 match out of the water, in my opinion. It is just exceptional. And it's funny because whilst the commentators were saying that Bret was getting a mixed reaction, there was nothing mixed about it. Bret Hart was our guy. We were right in the midst of the USA and Canada feud, and the crowd went absolutely nuts for Bret that night. I was there, had my Canadian flag, had my Hitman shades on, and it was just a magical night. The match is let down by the finish, the DQ finish, although it is a very, very distinctive finish with Bret being caught in the ropes, that kind of move that caused Mick Foley to lose an ear all those years earlier. Really like getting choked out by The Undertaker. The Undertaker doesn't stop. It is a DQ finish, but it's very, very fantastic, and one of Bret's best, one of Undertaker's best. And if you haven't seen it, I can't recommend it enough. The reason really though for recording this video is the main event, because this was a one match show in many regards, and still to this day it's a match that I can't wrap my head around. In all the live wrestling I've ever seen in my life, I've never experienced heat to this level. This is the kind of heat that you'd hear about in the 70s and 80s, but we'd never see in WWF. But the level of anger and vitriol that was levelled towards D-Generation X at the outcome of this match was off the charts. It was scary levels of heat. For my 13-year-old self, We'll get to that in a second, but this match is all about a British Bulldog. This match is set up to be a showcase of British Bulldog. This is SummerSlam 1992 version 2. British Bulldog has been European champion by this point for about 8 months since winning the tournament and beating his brother-in-law Owen in the finals. He's carried this European championship all year long, and this is the big defence in his home country. It's given even more gravitas by the fact that he dedicates the match to his sister, who is in very, very poor health. He does that just before the match, and he does that on the belief, as has countless reports have told, including Bret Hart's autobiography, because he knows that he's going over in this match. He knows that this is a hometown win for British Bulldog. As the rumour goes, and it's all rumour and innuendo in wrestling, but as we understand it, mere minutes before the match, the decision was made to change who would go over. In some click politicking, it was decided that Shawn Michaels would win the match, and that this would ultimately set up a rematch 8 months later, Mayhem in Manchester, April 1998, where the Bulldog would get his big money rematch. All sounds great on paper, but the reality is Davey Boy Smith had just dedicated this match to his sister. High emotions were there. The Bulldog comes out in his incredible cape, really, really evocative of 1992. He's got the family there. His wife Diana's there. I was actually a row behind on row 2 on that corner. I was about 10 seats away from Diana. I talked about Diana when she came on the show recently to do a Hall of Fame induction. So I was kind of watching the emotion throughout from the family that night. They didn't know what was going to go down. And it's just heartbreaking to watch. They have an incredible match, as they always did. The one thing about Shawn Michaels and Davey Boy Smith is they always brought out the best in one another. They were incredible opponents. They go just over 22 minutes. But about halfway through the match, the Bulldog's got a knee injury, and we start to see the various members of D-Generation X come out. So we get Triple H and we get Chyna. And what's really weird is we don't get the Hart Foundation. So Bret's there, Owen's there, we know they're both there, we've just seen them wrestle. But the crazy booking of this particular match is that it becomes a 3-on-1 beatdown of the British Bulldog. So unbelievably one-sided, where he has all the cards stacked up against him, and rather than this being to present an amazing babyface comeback, overcoming the odds and winning, instead what happens is in the end he gets put in a figure 4 leg lock with all of this outside interference and everyone interfering against him, and he passes out from the pain. And I remember vividly that moment when he lost and the bell was called. The crowd was in disbelief, absolute stunned, and then the anger descended. And as I say, I was only a little boy at the time. My experience of the WWF by this point had always been very light entertainment, and suddenly the anger in the NEC was something else. People were throwing literally glass beer bottles in the ring. I think one even almost bounces off Shawn Michaels' head, or something does hit him when he's up the runway. This was proper heat from a crowd that was livid. And I remember the kind of discontent as everyone kind of rumbled out of the arena that night. No one could believe it. The Hart Foundation runs to the ring after all the interference has happened and Davey Boy has been robbed, which from a booking standpoint makes no sense. It completely, why would the Hart Foundation not have got involved? Why would they have waited until that point? It was such a humiliating loss, and fascinating to look back on this one night only show and see how it becomes a precursor for the Montreal Screwjob just 6 weeks later. In many ways, this is when the Attitude Era properly begins. A lot of people pinpoint 2 days later, September 22nd, 1997, the show at Madison Square Garden where Steve Austin stuns Vince McMahon, where Bret Hart hears that his contract isn't going to be renewed, where Cactus Jack and Hunter Helmsley have a very infamous hardcore match. But actually, I would say that it's this night in the UK, September 20th, 1997, is the night that the Attitude Era truly began. began, and still to this day, 28 years on, I still get emotional thinking about this show, because this was when wrestling got very, very raw, very, very real, and very, very raw for me. The show was incredible in many regards. I mean, commercially, it gets like 20,000 buys. Like, it's a new endeavour for the WWF. On this new platform, Sky Box Office. This isn't an audience that are used to it. It does sell out, obviously, at the NEC. But Finn Martin, writing for Power Slam, described it as a sensation. He said, "The card remains the WWF's best ever in-ring presentation on UK shores. The fireworks were provided by the last 3 matches, all of which were superb." He goes on to describe Bret Hart and The Undertaker as an epic encounter, which was the last truly great match of the Hitman's career, and credited Michaels for having given the heel performance of the year. I mean, as a show, from beginning to end, One Night Only is a success. It's one of those nostalgic shows that you can look back on and it still stands up. It's got a very, very special feel to it, the kind of feel of a show that you don't really get very often. And it is a real, real moment in time. So, recording this on a weekend when all eyes are turned to the WWE and AEW war, but September 20th, 1997, 28 years ago, stands tall as a incredible moment in wrestling history. If you haven't watched it, I cannot recommend this show enough. As someone who was there, as someone who lived it, as someone who will always have that memory, I'm very grateful that I got to be a part of wrestling history. If you were there, I'd love to hear some comments from you on what you thought of the night. If you remember watching it on Sky Box Office, what were your reactions to One Night Only? How does One Night Only stack up against all of the other UK only pay-per-views? Will we ever get a show like this again in the UK that carries that much historical and emotional significance? So I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I've been Ben Veal. This is Wrestling Life. This is your channel. I'm a fan. This content has been created for fans. I want to hear from you. What do you want to see more of? Please support the channel. Please support the show. Please leave a like and a comment if you can. And for today, this has been looking back on the incredible, incredible night of wrestling that was One Night Only, the real birth of the Attitude Era.